but we do. We remain committed to that. And we will meet it in a canter. But they also hold the promise of further declines in energy costs, but only if the foundations for grid stability are in place. To back up intermittent renewables, we need firming capacity. Firming keeps the lights on when the sun isn't shining and the wind isn't blowing. It's a very practical proposition. Every megawatt of dispatchable generation, coal, gas, pumped hydro, batteries, can firm around 2 megawatts of renewables. And we need to bring forward new dispatchable generation capacity as a priority to complement what's happening in the renewable sector. In the decade to 2010, around 9.6 gigawatts of dispatchable capacity came online. In the decade since, only around 1.6 gigawatts of new dispatchable capacity has been connected, none of it here in New South Wales. And as the experience with Hazelwood and Victoria demonstrated, the risks in terms of cost and reliability from the exit of large, ageing, coal-fired power stations are real. Against this backdrop, Angus Taylor, our Energy Minister, last year established a task force to assess the potential impacts of Liddell's closure, working with the state government, working with the sector as well. It found that wholesale prices could jump by 30% or $20 per megawatt hour if the station's capacity was not replaced before it shuts down. We estimate that some 1,000 megawatts of new dispatchable generation is needed to keep prices down. And we intend to do something about it. Now, while the private sector has announced projects which could fill this gap, at this stage it is committed to very few. They have their investment decisions, they have their processes, I respect that. COVID has challenged investment metrics, but the physical realities of ageing generators mean we just can't hope for the best. To ensure affordable, reliable power, we need the market to deliver 1,000 megawatts of new dispatchable capacity by the summer of 2023-24, with final investment decisions by the end of April 2021. Now, that's less than 8 months, and we're counting each day. So this is the plan. If the energy companies choose to step up and make these investments to create that capacity, great. We will step back. If not, my government will step up and we will fill the gap. And to this end, Snowy Hydro is already developing options to build a gas generator in the Hunter Valley should the market not deliver. Now, the Commonwealth Government would prefer not to step in. That is not our plan A. But nor will we shy away from taking action to protect consumers and support jobs, including here in this region and so many like it. So I think there's some certainty there about what the investment environment looks like and what the capacity need is. And I'm sure we'll get there one way or the other. Alongside critical firming capacity, we need better integration of renewables into the electricity grid. This makes renewables work. Renewables are getting cheaper. That's great news, because we're about affordable power, taking pressure off households, taking pressure off job-creating businesses. Grid-scale solar costs fell more than 50% between 2015 and 2020 and are projected to fall by a further 54% by 2050. Falling technology costs will help put downward pressure on prices and emissions over the decades to come. They have also brought grid-scale wind and solar generation to economic parity with traditional sources of generation. Now, renewables like solar and wind don't need subsidies. What they need is integration. And without adequate planning and integration, rapid deployment of renewables can lead to delayed connection, curtailed output and congested transmission. Our energy plan understands this and includes measures to strengthen our transmission network to better move power to where it's needed. Having a renewable future isn't just about building a windmill. You've got to connect it up, and you've got to ensure it's backed in by the reliable power that firms it when the wind isn't blowing. That's not ideology. That's just common sense. So today I announced that the Commonwealth will work with state governments to accelerate 3 critical projects. We'll have more to say about these later. The Marinus Link, Project Energy Connect and VNI West interconnectors. Together with our support for HumeLink and the QNI interconnector, this means we are accelerating all priority transmission projects identified in the AEMO Integrated System Plan, creating over 5,000 jobs while reducing prices and keeping the grid reliable. We must also, though, modernise the way the electricity market operates to take account of technological change and to put more power into the hands of consumers. Now, a 21st century electricity market must have 21st century rules. And a package of market reforms and changes will come forward next year as part of the biggest shake-up of the national electricity market since it was created in 1998. New rules will take account of the increasingly distributed nature of generation and better recognise the critical stabilising role played by dispatchable generation. And the immediate focus will be on security measures, better integrating different generation technologies and a reliability framework. Longer-term options will focus on rules for a two-sided market, revised investment programs and a framework for the exit of ageing thermal generators. These reforms to be developed and agreed through National Cabinet's new Energy Reform Committee, which tasked this work at our last meeting, in fact, just over a week ago. An important reminder that the work the National Cabinet is doing is not just managing our COVID-safe plan, it's actually working on the JobMaker plan. And we see this as an important part of the JobMaker plan, and that's when the National Cabinet was made a permanent feature of how our federation works. We established a series of subgroups to work on those jobs-creating areas. Regional was a large one, which Michael McCormack is leading, and energy was another, which Angus Campbell, now he's running the defence forces, but Angus Taylor is leading that project.
So, ladies and gentlemen, there you have the national energy address there by the Prime Minister, and we will follow up that story later on as well, because there's a lot that's happening there. And right now, let's take a very quick look at the news headlines.
On the federal government to rethink its sharp wind back of unemployment payments, with new analysis predicting further economic pain. With the nation already in a recession, forecaster Deloitte says ending coronavirus top-up allowances for people on JobSeeker, youth allowance and parenting payments will see the loss of nearly 150,000 jobs over the next 2 years. In research commissioned for the Council of Social Service, Deloitte says an extra $31 billion will be stripped out of the economy.
The forecast comes as the Prime Minister is set to outline an ambitious plan for a gas-led recovery out of the COVID-19 recession. In a bid to drive power prices down, Scott Morrison will pledge to build a new gas-fired plant in the Hunter region of New South Wales if ageing coal-fired stations are not replaced by the private sector.
South Australia's borders could be open to New South Wales and the ACT as soon as today, with the state's Transition Committee expected to make a decision this morning. The state government had originally flagged opening those borders in late July, but a spike in COVID-19 infections set that plan back indefinitely.
And celebrations are getting underway this morning to mark the 20th anniversary of the Sydney Olympic Games. That cauldron will be reignited 2 decades after sprinter Cathy Freeman lit it to open the big event back in 2000. 2 billion people tuned in to watch the spectacle.
And that news there, all the news headlines coming your way. Well, right now, let's take a look at what our Premier had to say early this morning.
I want to back Queenslanders, I want to back Queensland jobs, and I want to back small businesses. The Treasurer and I are actively talking about our Queensland Economic Recovery Plan right across the state. Part of that recovery plan is clearly about making things in Queensland. The Queensland Government has also now set a target of 25% of our PPE should be sourced from Queensland. It is absolutely vital that we manufacture locally, and what we saw that during the pandemic, the whole of the world was looking for where they could source PPE. and we found that most of that was sourced either in China, the US or Germany. What we are doing now is building up the capacity so we can actually manufacture here.
But we make it great in the Sunshine State, and we see that again today with expanded manufacturing capacity being delivered in our state through government support. This ticks all the boxes for our government. Great Australian company making a product for the Australian market and for the Queensland market, and employing 35 of our fellow Queenslanders who lost their jobs because of COVID.
Aston Medical has a history of manufacturing in this state, and it is a fantastic state, and the facility that we've set up, we had a plan. We're in front of target in producing the masks, and we're really looking forward to being able to continue what we're doing, not just with masks, but in a whole variety of PPE equipment and other areas that have a medical feel to them.
We can employ people locally, we can manufacture locally, and we can buy locally, and that's exactly what my government wants to do. I want to back Queenslanders, I want to back Queensland jobs, and I want to back small businesses.
And yes, she said she wants to back the Queensland economy and the jobs, so that jobs stay here local. Well, yesterday was Hindi Divas Day, and the Australian Indian Radio and Brisbane Indian Times were invited to take part in the virtual celebration with the High Commission of India in Australia. And this is Peter. He's a Hindi teacher and he did a wonderful presentation yesterday, and his grasp of Hindi was just amazing. And of course, we had Harbans Kaur, another teacher who talked all about Hindi, and she actually focused on Nai Wale Hindi, meaning the new Hindi in this new generation. But right now it's time to go to some of the news in brief, and first up we will look at the Premier of Queensland as she announces the updates.
Dr. Young is one of the most professional women I have ever met. Her advice has kept Queensland safe during this pandemic. I think it is not right that a public servant of her high standing, and she is regarded as one of the best in the nation, be attacked for giving her clear advice. Now, let me also say this. This is really important. The only people being political here is Scott Morrison and Deb Frecklington. Now, if it means I have to lose the election, I will risk all that if it means keeping Queenslanders safe. I will always stand up for what I believe to be right in this state. I'm putting myself out there, I'm putting myself on the line. But I'm making no apologies for keeping Queenslanders safe during this time. That's what they tell me. They stop me in the street. People stop me and tell me that they want us to keep going with what we're doing. And I am relying on the best medical advice given to me by Dr. Young.
And while she is making that speech, let's again cross over and hear the Prime Minister Scott Morrison with that National Energy Address.
Australian users get their fair share of these new gas developments, and work is underway on options for a prospective gas reservation scheme, which will be done in consultation with industry and the states and territories. And we will support gas exports, but we must avoid past pitfalls. As we produce more gas for domestic use, we need the right infrastructure, of course, to connect up the East Coast gas grid at the lowest cost possible. That means efficiently connecting major sources of gas supply with customer hubs where there is significant demand. We will unify the market around a common set of priorities for gas pipelines and other critical infrastructure through a national gas infrastructure plan, just like we have with the integrated system plan for electricity. So under our government, a gas grid, an electricity grid and a water grid. And while we want the private sector to invest in this infrastructure, we are prepared to go further if we need to. The Commonwealth stands ready to step in to support pipeline development if necessary, as we are doing now with other nationally significant infrastructure like electricity interconnectors, water infrastructure and, of course, major highways. Finally, we need a competitive market that allows for fair bargaining between gas buyers and sellers, a market that empowers gas customers and ensures that they have the power to negotiate, not just accept the terms offered to them. Not good for jobs. Transparent pricing and greater pricing certainty is needed so end users can contract the volumes they need for the future, and so upstream producers can invest with confidence that there will be demand for their gas. It's a two-way street. Government can create the conditions for an open and transparent trading hub and act as an honest broker to match supply and demand. Now, we know many of our manufacturers can't wait for years for the market to reset and for the new gas supply to come online. So we will also move immediately to extend the heads of agreement with the East Coast LNG exporters and ensure they meet their end of the bargain to provide competitively priced gas to the domestic market. There are many other elements to our gas plan, including work on netback pricing and pipeline regulatory reform, all of which will be done closely with industry. And again, I want to thank...
So the message there is pretty clear that unless the private sector, comes to the party, they will still keep doing, the government will move ahead with this plan as he announces the National Gas Infrastructure Plan. And as we had in the news in brief, that the Sydney Olympics cauldron would once again be lit. Well, right now let's go to Melbourne, where the 14-day average has dropped again. So that is good news.
Average is around 54.4 at the moment. Where are you expecting that to be at the end of this week?
Look, it'll drop below 50 by the end of this week, I'm sure. If you look at the 14-day period before today, it's been in the 150, 170 kind of mark. But I've seen the unknown acquisition cases, the 14-day total, continually drop over recent weeks. And in the last few days, it's 4 or 5 per day. So again, if you look forward for the next 2 weeks, it should be in the 50, 60, 70 mark, which is obviously a positive trend. We don't report each and every day the mystery cases because they take 2 or 3 days to resolve. But that 14-day total, that rolling 14-day total, is something that should be tweeted today. I know I promised yesterday that Vic DHHS Twitter handle will be reporting that 14-day total for regional Victoria, which is less relevant. It's almost moot. They're going to get there tomorrow, all things being equal. But for Metro Melbourne, it'll be useful to watch that number ongoing.
And so is that September 28th date? You said previously it was set in stone. Is that still the case?
Yes. We need that time for the kind of settings that we have. But, I'm very confident we'll be in that 30 to 50 range for average daily cases. But if it's in the 20 to 30 range, all the better, but we need that time for the policy settings to be in place.
Have you any data on how many patients went to hospital, didn't have COVID and contracted it there?
I haven't seen it. It is able to be captured. VicNIS, our Victorian nosocomial infection surveillance system, has recorded patients' status in terms of coronavirus on admission to hospital, so we can interrogate all of that data and get an answer for you.
And is it safe?
So a decline in numbers in Victoria is good news, and the other news that we're going to now is to New South Wales, where there's again a decline in number, but this decline is not good because it's the decline in the number of testing. So let's hear from the New South Wales Premier.
I know that every day is a battle because I see very close at hand what goes into delivering these results and what it takes to actually get people to get tested. And we know that we can't let our guard down in New South Wales. The weekend testing rates always tend to be lower. But remember back in March when Dr. Chant and I were pleading to get the numbers up above 8,000 a day, some days we're getting over 30,000 tests, which is just amazing. But none of us can let our guard down. Remember, we let our guard down earlier in the year and then the Victorian situation arose completely unexpectedly. And we have to accept that until there's a vaccine, every day is a battle. Until there's a vaccine, all of us have to be aware of any symptoms we might have and stay home. And even when we're out and about, we must maintain that social distancing, and I'm the first one to acknowledge that none of us can rest easy just because there's one community case overnight.
Well, as he has mentioned that, whenever we are out and about, we really need to be very, very careful Well, right now, let's go to ICT, where the laws permit the possession and personal use of small amounts of cannabis, but complying is proving to be very, very difficult. So let's take a look at that report. Interesting, isn't it?
When Anastasios Nemikos found out that Canberrans would be allowed to grow cannabis for personal use, he immediately planned his move from Melbourne.
I pretty much messaged a couple of my friends who were looking for housemates in Canberra, and I said, hey guys, can I please move up? It is honestly 95% of the reason that I moved up to Canberra. I did not know a single thing about growing. I just went out there and I literally just spent time with it every single day, and it started to grow and grow and grow.
But it was a dream short-lived. He came home from work one day to find his prized possession missing.
So I went outside and all I see was a trail of dirt. Yeah, I was heartbroken.
The requirement that plants be grown outdoors, where they're more of a target for theft, is one of a number of complaints cannabis users have with the new ACT laws.
It's legal to grow your cannabis, but it's illegal to buy seeds. You can grow 4 cannabis plants, but you can only have 50 grams, which is less than what one will produce.
And those are real problems. I've got that exact same feedback.
Labor MLA Michael Pedersen introduced the bill last year.
The fundamental problem we face is that our ability to legislate in this space is limited. Commonwealth laws on supply, trafficking, they're not easy to get around. In fact, you can't get around them.
The ACT laws conflict with federal cultivation and possession laws. The federal government has repeatedly threatened to challenge them in the courts. It's still early days.
So there you go. It's not all green on the other side of the fence, as they reckon. Well, right now, Queensland and our borders, our borders still remain very, very tight, and tough laws will still be there. That report right up.
I have just had my 17th trip to the operating theatre, and most of those surgeries have been very difficult. I do have further surgery to have.
Trish Schneider has endured years of pain and surgery after severe complications from a pelvic mesh implant. Living in the northern New South Wales town of Casuarina, she's just over an hour's drive from her team of specialists across the border in Brisbane.
I did have my last consultation with my specialist on Zoom, and neither of us were particularly satisfied with that.
Trish's home is within the so-called border bubble, so she can actually enter the Sunshine State, but only as far as the Gold Coast and not to Brisbane.
I have in the past several times needed life-saving treatment by this team in Brisbane.
Trish says after a series of phone calls and online applications, her understanding is she can only see her doctors if she quarantines in a Brisbane hotel for 2 weeks. But she says that raises its own risks.
If I was in a hotel in Brisbane by myself, I'm not sure I could manage that.
Good morning. The Queensland.
So the tough laws still in place. Well, right now let's go to Melbourne, where you'll see the man being arrested as he comes and first kicks the police car, and then he tries to run away, and the police just are quick to get on the back and tip him over with the car. So let's take a look at that footage coming from Melbourne. And there he is, hitting the car, and he thinks he's run away. Couldn't get too far, and right now we're going to look at, living in CBDs, what's the pain and how are we going to, survive with all the things. So some of the things are that we will need to be buying a lot more local.
The pandemic has triggered some profound reassessments of what people value. The long commute may no longer be an issue as people adjust to working from home. Many of Australia's biggest companies, who once housed nearly all their employees in CBD skyscrapers, will now permanently have part of their workforce stay home. As finance correspondent Phil Lasker found out, it's led to a suburban renaissance, which has flowed through to spending and rents.
We're going to play with the ball. It's going to be very fun.
Terry Rawnsley is at work, and this is his lunch break. As an economist, he studied the change in spending patterns triggered by COVID. Terry's Melbourne CBD office has been deserted since March. Now his office is just a few metres away from where he's entertaining his children. The Stage 4 lockdowns have imposed tougher restrictions on his movements, but before that, he was doing what people all over the country are doing.
Spending more money at the local cafes and restaurants for a bite to eat, and also spending more money at supermarket and sort of making more food at home.
Almost every second customer will come in and go, oh, you've opened up through COVID, like, why did you do that? But they still come in and buy something from us.
Arkan Yusuf opened his bakery a month ago in Sydney's southern suburbs opposite a train station. Even he expected to be struggling initially, but more people are around and he's benefiting.
At the moment, our customers, they want the birthday cakes, they want some bread for the day, they come out for a coffee just to get out of the house and things like that, so our customers are just all the locals.
Since March, consumer spending on incidentals like coffees, lunches and alcohol has been diverted from the CBD to the suburbs. In Melbourne, it amounts to at least $250 million. In Sydney, it's more like $400 million. A regional map of Melbourne shows a massive 26% fall in CBD spending, while areas outside the CBD have had strong increases of more than 10% despite the harsh lockdowns.
And that's the way things will be these days, you know, staying local, buying local, and, you know, all those coffees, whatever, you can just get around the corner. So why would you want to travel all around, right into the city to buy or get your coffee? Well, right now, let's take a very, very quick commercial break before we go to the ending part of today's segment.
ग्लोबनेट रियलिटी 1989 से लेकर अब तक का विश्वसनीय और माननीय ब्रिस्बेन का रियल एस्टेट एजेंट है। उषा चंद्रा, जो कि ग्लोबनेट की डायरेक्टर है, अपने ग्राहकों को ईमानदार और एथिक सर्विसेज देती हैं। अगर आप ब्रिस्बेन की प्रॉपर्टी में पूंजी लगाना चाहते हैं और आप चाहते हैं कि आपकी प्रॉपर्टी को प्रोफेशनली मैनेज किया जाए, तो आप आज ही कांटेक्ट कीजिए उषा चंद्रा को। लैंडलाइन नंबर है 38654466 और मोबाइल नंबर है 0419775416। और आप प्रॉपर्टी की अधिक जानकारी और करंट अपडेट्स के लिए हमारी वेबसाइट पे लॉगिन कर सकते हैं। हमारी वेबसाइट है www.globnetreality.com.au। ग्लोबनेट रियलिटी आपका अपना लोकल रियल एस्टेट एजेंट है। हमारा पता है ग्लोबनेट रियलिटी, शॉप नंबर 5, 2281 सैंडगेट रोड, बुंदल, क्वींसलैंड। ग्लोबनेट रियलिटी, रियल एस्टेट इज अवर वर्ल्ड।
Real estate is the world, that's for sure. Well, right now, let's go to the ending segment of today's news. And by the way, let's see if Prime Minister is still going, or has he the finished? Okay, he's still going. So let's join in that. Now, so his the segment, the press release there is finished. Now, for a quick look at the finance.
To finance now, the local share market has bounced back from Friday's fall, and the Australian dollar was flat today. Here's Alan Kohler.
The All Ordinaries Index closed 0.7% higher, only because the mining companies all rose pretty strongly, but the best gain by far was the software company Citadel Group, up 40%, because of a takeover offer from private equity firm Pacific Equity Partners, which has been accepted with alacrity. Rio Tinto surged back above $100 minus its CEO. Macquarie fell because of a profit warning, and waste management business Cleanaway dropped 7% because of bullying claims against the CEO. Now, it's worth dwelling for a moment on the statement that the company put out about this today. The board said Mr Vic Bansal did have some issues with overly assertive behaviour, and the CEO himself acknowledged that his behaviour might have been better and expressed contrition. And the board said, in effect, that's your last chance. Now get out of our sight and get back to work. Asian markets were up today after a flat session on Wall Street on Friday. Iron ore continued to power ahead on commodity markets, and the Australian dollar was steady in the mid-72s. There are big things happening in the payment system at the moment. Cash has been declining for years, as we all know, and debit cards have been rising. But this year, that trend has been turbocharged with a huge transfer from credit cards to debit cards. And finally, there also seems to be some transfer from wool to cotton going on. The wool price is down 50% since January, while the cotton price has been recovering for 5 months.
So there you are, wool is going down and cotton is going up, and while the credit cards are going down and debit cards are going up, which is not a bad thing. You know, when people use the debit cards, it means they're using their own money, and credit card is using borrowed money. So that is good to see. Well, right now, let's take a look at some of the functions and events that are happening. First up, we have the Mahishasur Mardani, and this is arranged by Bengali Society of Queensland. Mahalaya, which is the arrival of Durga Mata on 8th, so close to the heart and soul of every Bengali this year. Let's celebrate together the auspicious tradition of Mahalaya by tuning into Australian Indian radio. But this will be early in the morning, 4 a.m. on Thursday, September 17th, and listen to the legendary voice of late Sri Virendra Krishna Bhadra. Well, right now, let's take a look at all the rest of the functions and events. Don't forget that a lot of functions and events are now taking place virtually or online, and so look out for those dates and times. And as I know, I have missed one or two. I just didn't mark the diary properly. So there's so much that would be happening online these days. So that's again not a bad forum. Sitting in the comfort of your home or your office, and you take part. You get a chance to take part without having to get out of the house, go travel, find parking, etc. So there you are, ladies and gentlemen. How do you like my little groove box? Yeah, I found it and I brought it back into the studio today. So do you like it with the bass or without the bass line? So this is with the bass. No bass. So ladies and gentlemen, with that, we'll just take a look at those fires happening in California as they lead out story for today.
The smoke's so thick it turned day into night. Some saying it feels apocalyptic.
In scenes frighteningly familiar to Australians, smoke haze from massive forest fires is blanketing the west coast of the United States.
When the public and the community sees the skies being orange, you've got this smoke. What is really going on? Is this what we're in for, for the future? And so, yeah, I think it truly did leave people with a very different feeling
Ken Pimlott ran the California Fire Agency, retiring in 2018 after 30 years. Even after a couple of recent horror fire seasons, he says the intensity and scope of this year's fires is breaking all records.
Over the last 5 years, 6 years, you think you've seen the worst, but they're becoming increasingly more intense, larger. I think what's truly different about this year, 3.1 million acres have burned so far, and we're only in the middle of September. We're really getting into the worst part of fire season.
This is the operational briefing for the North Complex West Zone. There is still potential for fire growth Monday through Wednesday.
The manpower and resources needed to fight these fires is massive.
So just remember your watch, your calendar, and your instincts, and they're all going to start coming into play in the next few days.
Here at the Silver Dollar Fairground, crews from California's North region are gearing up for another long day.
Have a good shift.
We're on 24-hour shifts, so the crews are on the line for 24 hours straight. So basically they go out on the line around 7 to 8 in the morning. They're out assigned to the incident for 24 hours.
The nearby Bear North Complex fire has been burning since August.
We're working on all the priorities. Number one being a life safety threat. Should we find anybody in the area, we're asking them to vacate the area and safely get them out.
80-kilometre-an-hour winds swept the fire beyond containment lines and into residential areas.
Fire just got crazy all of a sudden, and the skies were dark. I mean, it was like nighttime at 11 o'clock in the morning. So I just grabbed a couple of things and jumped in the car.
Local hotels are filling up with evacuees like Sarah Spatz and her family, who got out with just a few suitcases.
We found out the next day that, yeah, we had lost our home, as well as we had another home that my mother was living in, and we lost that one. And the other place that my son was living in, we lost that one as well. So we went from 3 houses to no houses in about 4 hours. There's no safe place for any of us. You just have to be ready for whatever happens.
So just being ready for whatever happens, you know, that's the news coming out of America. And it is, you know, we can remember our bushfires that happened here as well. And you can see the firefighters out and about there trying to help and assist. I'd like to say welcome to the show to Jason Gertie and Tuluk all the way from India as well. Good to have you on the show, you know, and thanks for always joining in, and good morning from Australia. But right now it's time to say goodbye, and until tomorrow, be good, but most of all, stay